Now the book will be presented by Ben Reason. Ben is, together with Lavrans, the founding partner of LiveWork. He's been a driving force and has written large parts of the book. I think it is interesting to note that the book is published by a well-recognized American publisher, while the knowledge is built mainly from Norwegian cadence stories. Ben, we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Judith. Thank you, Tor. If anyone wants to play a game, you can spot the linguistic differences between Tor and me from business school and design school in the talk. So I am going to talk through the book, but it's sort of a story of LiveWork as well. So the first word in the title is not design, it's service. And actually it's really important to kind of remember and communicate that where we started as a team was getting really excited and interested in service. We were kind of stimulated by the big statistics about where the economy is that Tora just mentioned, around 70 to 80% of many economies being in the service sector. Even Brazil, which is a big raw material exporter, still has a dominant service economy, I think. And I guess as designers, we looked at that and we said, but hang on a minute, you know, we're working on all these services and they're generally quite frustrating. We had a cliche that no one kind of loves their bank like they like their BMW. And so isn't that a great opportunity to do something? And our business is kind of underperforming in the service area. And we also got quite excited about the fact that we thought this didn't just apply to the private sector and to commercial businesses, but it was a whole opportunity to improve public services, that most citizens' experience of government and of their local services was not what it could be, and you'd often hear the same kind of complaints and irritations about, you know, what it is to deal with these large bureaucratic organizations and how big a gap there is between me as an individual and what I expect and what I get from them. And then in a kind of very aspirational sense, also thought there's a third challenge out there in the world, which is that we are living beyond our kind of environmental means, and we need to be able to learn to do more with less. And we took a lot of inspiration from a book called Natural Capitalism, which had a chapter which was all about how effective delivery of services can reduce the amount of natural resource that's required to deliver value to people. So, for example, a car club can provide many times more people with access to a vehicle with just one vehicle. So that was the kind of where LiveWork started, and then we sort of thought, well, what can we do? You know, we're designers. We don't have, you know, we can't create new businesses necessarily in this area. So what can we do, and what's our experience to date? And we found we'd been working with service organizations, either large ones that were trying to get their head around the internet, or small ones that were trying to exploit the internet. And that there was a kind of, the world of services was changing quite dynamically because of new technology, new communications, new digital technology, and that meant that almost every service that you can think of was going to go through some kind of major change. And the one I always think is really interesting is that primary school teachers are more and more required to use technology, use the internet to deliver their lessons. One of our team developed a service with Skype called Skype in the Classroom that would allow a teacher to connect their class to a scientist at NASA if they wanted to, things like that. So there was a real opportunity to use that. And then we looked at what designers do have and what that could bring to service, which was, I guess, primarily for us, and the kind of design that we came from was that focus on human experience and how we can understand human experience, but also design for human experiences and bring that to bear. And maybe that was the thing that a lot of organizations were missing, was an understanding of their customer or their end user and how they felt about things. And if we could bring that to bear, but also help them work through what a different, better, more effective experience could be. And then the kind of a toolkit of the ability to make things visible and tangible, which seemed incredibly valuable with services which are harder to get your hand around, harder to kind of pick up and evaluate. So can you use storytelling and visual techniques to help organizations really understand what possibilities are? And thirdly, to kind of get into more practical making, testing, learning. So in a way, we were looking at the kind of traditional user-centered design toolkit and saying, how do we apply this to services? So fast forward about 10 years, and that was something that we were doing regularly, I think. And we kind of hit a bit of a wall in terms of our ambition being here, and we weren't quite there yet. So we lifted our heads up a bit. We talked to a lot of our clients and collaborators, people like Tor, who had a different perspective, to try and understand what it was, why not everything we did was having the impact that it deserved, because all the ideas were so fantastic. Why weren't they getting adopted and taken forward by all these companies? Why hadn't we changed the world yet? All that kind of stuff. And humbly, we figured out that we didn't really know what it was like to run a large organization, what it was like to try and change the way you operate, what it was like to live in a competitive market as a corporation. That we didn't really understand business from the inside, and that we needed to kind of add that to the service design knowledge base and methodology. And I think to sum that up, I think it falls into two big pots. We didn't really understand what happens inside an organization when all the moving parts come together to try and deliver something, and what it means to try and change that. So we now know that means you might be dealing with the policies that it makes in order to govern the way it runs. It might mean the systems that it employs and how much it costs to change those. It might mean about engaging the people and taking them with you. All things that are quite well understood in business schools and in organizations, but not so well by us. And we thought there was an opportunity to kind of connect those things to what we brought, which was this external customer-driven, and also our kind of favorite phrase, which was, no one really sees the whole organization apart from the customer. So maybe we've got something to offer all these different expertise areas within an organization. The second area of business that we needed to understand better was the kind of, I guess, the context, the market, the policy landscape, if it's government, that they operate in. That, you know, it's not just about the customer, that the things that are influencing and affecting decisions are broader than that. So can we bring the kind of the real external context and the real internal organization into the service design activity? So that's kind of where this book picks up, and it's not a finished project by any means, and in a way it's kind of our first step from design into service. So what we've done, built on the back of all those conversations with our clients, is try and look at what we do and when it has been effective, why it's been effective, and what business or organizational problem it's resolved. So we've, in a way, turned the service design on its head and tried to talk about it from three perspectives. So the first of those perspectives is that there are people within organizations whose job it is, or whose target is, built around customers. So they're either in marketing or customer experience or customer service. So they might be tasked with reducing complaints or increasing sales or retention, all these kind of things. So there are people whose job it is to focus on customers. So we should be able to help them. And it's not a great big step from where we were to where they are, but it's understanding. So the challenges that we've defined in that section of the book around how do you engage customers? How do you work with the fact that there are irritations and failures in their day-to-day experience, and if you pick those off one by one, you improve the efficiency, perhaps, of the service and the reduction in the failure rate. Can you understand customers in a way that helps you innovate new products and services and make new revenue streams and things like that? So these are all things that kind of we understood. It just was about putting them in a slightly different language. And to give you an example, so one of the challenges is innovate around customer experience. And we've talked about a project we did for a large supermarket in the UK who wanted to explore new areas, kind of new services they could provide around personal data, them having huge amounts of data on their customers. And so we looked at that through the lens of, well, what is the job that the customer is doing? Is it moving house or managing their day-to-day? So that's the kind of thing that we've looked at there. But starting more with the challenge that they face rather than what's that great new service that we can provide. The second of the three sections is around the business. So the business being the part of the organization that monitors performance and is concerned about strategic development and progress. So what are the projects that we've done? What are the issues that businesses and people with a kind of a business role within organizations face that we have helped to address? And those have been things like, how do we innovate around the way that we do business that differentiates us from our competition? Or how do we take new things to market effectively? How do we make sure that this thing we want to do is actually effective in the way it goes forward? One of the things we picked up on, which is kind of very specific, was, so how do we become a more digital business? These were deliberately reflective of what we'd heard in the market. And an example of that is this taking things to market is, so each challenge has a case study, and this is around some work we did with Orange and Barclaycard, which is a mobile telephone company and a credit card company in the UK, who wanted to launch the UK's first mobile phone-based contactless payment service. And we worked alongside the product manager taking that from concept to launch and helped that person kind of coordinate all the moving parts that come together to create the customer experience. So that kind of holistic view, but also find, before it's too late, where it's going to fail before you go live. So they were very focused on the act of getting your phone out and paying for something. And when we tested it with customers, we found that most people couldn't get beyond the take it out of the box and set it up so it works phase. And if you can't set it up so it works, no one will take it out of their pocket and use it to pay for it, and it will fail drastically. So we put a lot of effort into fixing the out-of-the-box and setup points and actually getting them to invest in that early so that the thing stood a chance when they went live. So the final third section is looking at the organization. So the large, from my point of view, the big bit of the iceberg under the surface that you can't see when you're focused on the customer experience bit. And again, the challenges that we understood from our clients that they had employed us unwittingly to help with were things like, how do you help us align as a group of disparate departments around something in common, a common vision? How do we work with our frontline staff to take them on the journey to be to a kind of a new job that they might be doing? How do we become more agile? How do we, reflect on what customer experience is and bring that in to the way we work? And a kind of a big question, which I might leave for Kim actually, is how do we become a more customer-centric organization? How do you actually put it into the kind of the glue and the operations that we have? So my final thing is an example for that, where we did a small piece of work with London Underground to understand how stations would need to evolve in the future and create a strategic vision for stations, which was pitched to the Mayor of London and accepted. And then the client came back to us and said, I've got a real problem now, is we have to deliver this. And we have the most militant union in the UK, who, I don't know if any of you know, but if they go on strike, they shut London down, and it costs tens of millions of pounds. Well, the lost economic value is tens of millions of pounds. So, and the chief exec has promised the workforce that we will engage them differently. So he said, I really like the way you work, and you're different. What would you do? So I said, well, I don't know, we could do a really big design project with all of your staff and take them through and help get them to co-design their future job, which we did with 800 station supervisors and their teams. And we did check in recently and said, did we have an impact on this, on the the industrial relationship and the reduction in strikes that came afterwards. And they said, absolutely, yes, you paid for yourself 10 times over. So I guess that's a measure of impact for you, Tor. If you want, you can go and interview them and we can create a case study. So I hope that gives you an overview of what the book is, but also, I guess, a bit more of a personal story about where it comes from. And thank you all for listening.